Okay, when last we met, we had blood going through the pulmonary veins, which veins carry blood back to the heart, and emptying into the left atrium. Every time blood goes from one chamber out to somewhere else, it has to go through a valve. And in this case, it goes through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle, and that's where we ran out of time. So the next step in this process is that the left ventricle has to pump blood out, and that means it has to go through a valve. Now the thing about the left ventricle to remember, the right ventricle pumps blood to the lungs, and if you think about it, the distance from your heart to your lungs is pretty short. So the right ventricle, even though ventricles are more muscular than atria, the right ventricle is not still a whole lot more muscular. The left ventricle has to pump blood out to the entire body, everything else, the brain, the gluteal region, the bottom of your feet, the tips of your fingers, your abdominal organs. So the left ventricle has to be a lot more muscular than the right ventricle. In fact, the left ventricle is the most muscular chamber of the heart. So, as blood is being pumped out of this muscular chamber of the heart, it has to go through a valve. And the valve that it goes through is the aortic semilunar valve, and aortic refers to the aorta. You've probably heard of the aorta before. So blood goes through the aortic semilunar valve into the aorta, the biggest, baddest, highest pressure artery in the human body, because when blood is leaving the left ventricle, which is the strongest chamber, it's leaving at very high pressure. So the aorta has to be very tough, very thick-walled, so that the aorta doesn't rupture. Think about how many times your heart pumps over the course of your lifetime. If your aorta were thin, if it were not super reinforced, at some point in your life, your aorta would split open, and the only way that you survive that is if it's a very small leak, or if you are already outside the emergency room of a hospital when it happens. Otherwise, you bleed out in the course of a couple of minutes. So let's take a look at the coloring sheet on this one. So the aortic semilunar valve is right here, and on the list it is right here. And then the aorta, we're going to actually combine three different things. The ascending aorta, the aortic arch, and the thoracic aorta, we're going to all color the same color. So H1, H2, and H3. So there. Ollie says hello. And then there's a little bit right in here. And then there is some down here. So pause the video for a moment so that you can get that colored. The aorta is a huge artery, largest artery in the body, but it doesn't stay that way. The further away from the heart the aorta goes, it branches off, and every time it branches, it gets a little bit smaller. Think about it in terms of if you've ever driven on I-75 near Detroit, it's like 4 lanes, and the closer you get back home, it gets smaller and smaller. It goes to 3 lanes, to 2 lanes, to then a 2-lane highway, to then a side street, and then you're in your driveway. So you're going from very large to very small, and that's what happens with the aorta. It goes, as it gets away from the heart, it branches into smaller and smaller arteries until they become capillaries, which, remember, not only are the smallest blood vessels in the body, they also are the turnaround point for blood flow, and they are the only place that gas exchange can take place. And remember, I want you to know that. So once the aorta gets to the point of capillaries, we are at the level of cells. Now, before you go on, I want you to look at these videos because they are videos that show what capillaries are like, or what happens in capillaries. So go ahead and pause the video. I think you can click on the links right from this video and go to these, but if not, you can copy and paste the links or just type it in to your browser search bar and you can watch these videos. So go ahead, pause the video and do this. So here we are at the capillaries at the cellular level. And at this point, I'm going to go to a different slide to show you a drawing of what's happening and walk through it that way, just like we did with the lungs yesterday. And it's very similar to what happens to the lungs, or at the lungs. So let me switch this real quick. Here we go. So we are here at the level of small arteries. The very smallest arteries before they reach the capillary level are arterioles. Remember, our definition of artery is any blood vessel that is going away from the heart. So that means that blood is going away from the heart towards these cells, and it could be any cells in the body, anywhere. And all of the little yellow circles are different cells. And here on the other side of this, as the blood then changes direction, that's going to be where the capillaries are, blood is now going back towards the heart into the very smallest of the veins, which are called venules. And here in the middle is where the capillaries are. Well, as blood is in these small arteries going towards the cells, it has high levels of oxygen, low levels of carbon dioxide, because remember, those two things are always opposite of each other. They are inversely proportional. The cells, because they are doing the things that cells do, they are taking part in cellular respiration, they are producing carbon dioxide and other substances that will turn into liquid waste as a byproduct. And so at the cellular level, the cells are high in carbon dioxide and low in oxygen. So here again, we have differences in concentration. There's high carbon dioxide in the cells, low carbon dioxide in the arterioles headed into the capillaries. And then there's low or high oxygen in the arterioles and low oxygen in the cells. So you're going to have carbon dioxide move from the cells to the capillaries, and you're going to have oxygen moving from the capillaries to the cells. So now, as blood is leaving the capillaries and heading into the venules, into the small veins, this is by diffusion, by the way. Don't forget about that. High concentration to low concentration. So now, as blood leaves the cells, it is high in carbon dioxide and low in oxygen. So again, at the cellular level is where we have gas exchange taking place from the capillaries to the cells, and this is through diffusion. All right, so that's what's happening here at the cellular level. So let's get that filled in your PowerPoint outline. So at the cells, blood is high in oxygen, low in carbon dioxide. Feel free to pause the video whenever you need to if I go too fast. The cells are high in carbon dioxide and low in oxygen. So oxygen moves from the blood to the cells by diffusion. And carbon dioxide and wastes move from the cells to the blood by diffusion. And now, because the blood in the veins, in the venules, is low in oxygen, we say that the blood is now deoxygenated. Aww. So here we are now with blood that is low in oxygen, and that's not going to help anybody out. So we have to get the blood back to a point where it can once again pick up more oxygen. So we have to get the blood back to the lungs. Well, that means that we have to get the blood back to the heart. Right now, blood is in the smallest of veins, the venules, and the way that this works, first of all, Let's remember that the wastes are going to be filtered out by the kidneys and turned into urine. I always seem to forget this part, but this is a really important part. Because if these wastes are not filtered out by the kidneys, if your kidneys are not working properly, those wastes are toxic and they build up in your bloodstream and they actually can kill you. So, but to get the blood back to the heart, with the aorta, we started with one very large artery and we branched off into smaller and smaller arteries until you got to the smallest arteries of all, called the arterioles. In this case, we're starting with the smallest of veins, and two very, very small veins will merge together to form a little bit bigger vein. And then that little bit bigger vein will merge together with another vein to form a little bit larger vein. So the veins are going to go from very, very small to very large, and the very largest of the veins are called the vena cavas, or the vena cavas, depending on who you talk to. So these two vena cavas, there are two of them. One collects blood from the upper part of the body. That's called the superior vena cava, because it is superior means above, so above the heart. And blood from the lower body is collected by the inferior vena cava. So let's take a look at our coloring sheet here. The vena cavas on this picture, you've got over here the superior vena cava, that's letter A. And then the inferior vena cava is right here, A1, and that is shown down here. So take a second to pause the video and color those in. All right, so both of those vena cavas, I don't know if you noticed, but they empty blood back into the right atrium, and we are right back where we started. Ta-da! So that's how come this is, when I said at the very beginning, this is a cycle. We had to pick somewhere to start. Right atrium seemed to be as good a place as any. So that is the complete and total type of a deal. So what's going to happen, you're going to have to be able to fill in all these blanks, but I'm going to make another video that has gives you an opportunity to practice this so that you are all on the same page and you are ready to go, because we're going to have a quiz on this next week. I hope this helped, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.